Haidala Isis, Kalkajad Hino Dihad Kilgakayang. I'm Erin Brillin, and I'm from the Haida and Cree Nations. Together with my husband, Andy Everson, we have dedicated ourselves to the revitalization and preservation of our cultures. But as each month passes, our communities along the coast lose precious elders. Every time an Indigenous elder passes, gone with them is a lifetime of wisdom that is lost to the coming generations. The Next Ancestors podcast features Indigenous elders and cultural knowledge keepers who have amassed a wealth of knowledge to share with us all. Indigenous wisdom is needed now more than ever to help us navigate in these uncertain times. And through this podcast series, each episode will serve to preserve this valuable wisdom to share with the world before it's too late. Today we're here with Shelley Joseph, and she is a wellness facilitator. She does work with Indigenous people all over the island and throughout BC. Yeah. Shelley Joseph is the daughter of Chief Robert Joseph, who we interviewed earlier in the season. So thanks for being with us, Shelley.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. Gela Kesla, Nugo Hekwagil Oga, Latinlacha Hegums, Umpas Quinquiligedzi Wakias, Abumpas Quintilok. I am Hekwagil Oga. My English name is Shelley Joseph, Shelley Jo. I am the youngest daughter of Chief Robert Joseph and my late mother, Donna Joseph. And both of them are Musgamakw, but I do have blood ties to the Numgis, the Kwagils, Mamalalekla, and the list goes on.
Mm-hmm. Well connected.
Yeah.
One of the questions I ask all the guests is, when you think back to your upbringing and who you learned the most about your culture from, and what are some of those key teachings that you still hold with you today that you were raised with?
My first memories was for being in the big house. My father brought me to a potlatch in Alert Bay and basically left me with all the aunties on the side while he did his work on the floor. And so those aunties, some main ones were Elsie Williams, the late Elsie. She was huge mentor in my cultural life. And Ruby, she was Keetla, but she was Dawson, but she was born Ruby Dick from Kinkum Inlet. I went to Kwakwala daycare.
Oh, really?
Yeah, in Campbell River. It was in the basement of a church.
Oh, wow.
And in there, the teachers were Hilda Seaweed, Sarah Johnson. Those are some of the key founding mentors that I had growing up, yeah.
And what are some of the teachings that you remember?
One that has always stuck with me is to always be teachable. That at any moment I don't have all the answers and I'm not always right.
Yeah.
That's really helped me in culture, but also in my personal life in big ways, yeah. And to be of service always.
Yeah, that's something that I keep hearing from all of the elders is it's always about how much you're giving, and not about what you're getting, which some people get confused about.
I was at the age of 11, my dad had his first potlatch, and my aunties had called me to the back room and they sat me down and said, "We want you to watch everything because this is going to be your role."
Oh,
so from the age of 11, I was mentored to.
Well, I was going to ask you, I will ask you more about that, but that's when it started, when you were 11? That's amazing.
Yeah, like really intentionally sat down and watched, this is what you're going to do. So I've been doing that since, that was in 1981.
Well, no wonder you're so good at it. That makes a lot of sense. It's so much work back there.
Yeah. And they made sure, I knew who the families were in all the villages, because that's part of it too, right? Knowing who to call when it's time for their tribes to represent on the floor.
Well, we might as well jump into that now that we're already on that topic, because that's one of the things that I've seen you do, and you do it so well. I mean, up and down the coast, obviously, different tribes run potlatches differently, but the one thing I love about Kwak potlatches is how organized the backroom situation is. In Haida culture, they don't do the backroom thing at all, right? So it's like super different.
But yeah, one of the first times I saw you in action is when you come out and you're finding people in the crowd and at first, like my first quack potlatch, I didn't even know what was going on. I'm like, what is happening here? But yeah, so what, like explain more about the role in the back room and like what kind of responsibility that is and what sorts of things you do back there.
Always have gone with my dad to meet with the family, all the family meetings leading up to it. So I already have a sense of what the schedule is going to be, like what dances are coming, who's going to get it, their names, why they were chosen, on and on that list goes. And so come the day of the potlatch, I already have that in mind, and somebody will have, nowadays anyways, will have written it on a flip chart, or we have it all printed out. It wasn't like that when I first started. It was very...
You're just going by memory.
Usually, the chief's wife or the matriarch of the family would be, okay, Shelley, can you go get this family or so-and-so, and we're going to do that next. But now it's all written down or typed out. And so just keeping as much of that on schedule and on task as possible, while communicating with the chiefs to make sure we're on the same page, on the same point in the schedule, to communicating with the speakers, communicating with the singers, and then having the other ladies in the back putting the appropriate regalia on the dancers. We have to know what they're wearing, if they have their own regalia or new regalia, knowing that and having the girls dress them. And we strive to have one or two ready ahead of time, so there's not so much lag out on the floor.
Yeah, totally.
Because while it's busy and chaotic in the back, I know people are sitting out there, kind of waiting. Yeah, there may be a lot of downtime sometimes, so I try to do my best to mitigate that and keep things flowing. Yeah, and then keep everybody calm too. That's I find is a really big part back there. So maintaining my own sense of calm, be like, okay, no, we got this. We're doing good. Things are on track.
Yeah, it can be hectic back there because you're thinking like a lot of times there's sometimes 20, 30 people in the back that all need to have their regalia put on. And then to make sure that it's not going to come loose while they're dancing, because that's a whole other responsibility where you're making sure things are tied right. And
tied
so they're
right,
not going to come
pinned
flying
right
off.
And on straight. And
And then also knowing which ones are sort of more appropriate for certain people to wear too. That's something that's really different from Haida potlatches too, is that most people only wear their own regalia, whereas another surprise for me was when you go up in the back and people just put stuff on you, and just it's very different, but it's also very efficient too, because you don't have to worry about where's my stuff and where did it get put.
That's changed in my lifetime.
Oh, really?
Yeah, when I started, people brought their own regalia, and we would help them with their own regalia, and it's been, in more recent times, I think, since the amazing Maxine has all of her blankets and offers to bring them for our families, her and Coke has a big supply of regalia as well that he often lends to people. But before that, people brought their own regalia. Yeah. But I don't think logistically now that would work anymore, because there's always so many people, and where would they keep it?
So for people who don't really have a context as to what like a potlatch program looks like, what are some of the dances that you would be getting people prepared for?
All of them. So we start with the morning ceremonies. We would call family members to represent their family if they are in mourning, and it's usually from the last potlatch to this potlatch. If somebody has passed away, we would bring somebody to come represent their family, and that to note that they're grieving, and we would honor their loved one by naming them, including, the host family. It's usually memorials now that a lot of people have potlatches for, so having that representation there, and the ladies dressed, and different tribes have different ways of how that goes too, so knowing that. Right. Because some will come out and have their blankets with the buttons out, and then they just stand up and dance on the fourth song, and others will have it inside out, and then before the fourth song we have to come out and flip them around the right way. There's that first part, and then we move into the cedar bark ceremony, which is a lot more regalia entailed. There's so much that goes into all of the dances within the cedar bark ceremony, and knowing the different types of cedar that you can put on people.
Right.
There's the red dyed cedar that's more specifically for the Hamatsa series, I guess you can call it. And then the yellow cedar would be for all of the other dances. That's, I think, something that's not talked about enough, to the different types of cedar that can be used on what dances and who has the right to wear red. For those really specific dances, the initiations, a lot of times the family will have them new regalia made for them, so we'll have to set that aside in a specific spot and bring it out the right time, put it on the correct way. Otherwise, we're looking for the proper crest among the hundreds of blankets that are there for that person if they don't have their own regalia. Yeah, there's just so much that goes into it. And then helping the dancers who wear masks, get them on. So it's, sits securely and isn't falling or things like that. Nowadays, there are a lot of the carvers that come in the back to help with that.
Yeah.
Dress
They're
them.
rigging up. And
Yeah, I'll aid with them. And then we have a much more involved Hamatsa society. Yeah, that wasn't something that was there when I was growing up. And I really credit that to Bo and Marcus for pulling us together and doing the work that we do now and how we show up now for potlatches.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, your dad was saying he was usually like the only one on the floor when he was younger.
Yeah. Growing up, he was an attendant.
Yeah.
He talked a lot of the younger people through that, teaching them, what to do on the floor, what to watch for, and how to keep them safe, the dancers safe, and how to keep the, the witnesses safe, and all of those things. Yeah.
It's cool to see though, because in just 1 or 2 generations, you go from just having one person who's capable of doing that, and now you see there's like 5 or 6 people on the floor now.
Yeah.
Which is amazing.
Yeah, so much so. In the 70s, this was in the old big house in Alert Bay. And a lot of times they chose to have potlatches during June sports because families were already coming to Alert Bay.
Yeah.
And so it was a real hard split of who was on the soccer field and who was in the big house. Very small crowds compared to today. Fill a house from 9 in the morning until 8 the next morning. And
Yeah.
It's been really awesome to watch that grow in our people. How they've invested themselves.
Do you remember how old your dad was when he potlatched for the first time? He couldn't remember, so I was wondering if you remember how old he was.
1981.
42.
And it wasn't something that he had thought of. All of his sisters and cousins, Auntie Elsie a lot, mostly I think nudged him. No, you better have a potlatch. So he did.
Yeah.
Under their guidance and their gentle nudges. Yeah.
It was cool though. He said that he got that the settlement money for the residential school, and then was like, "That's what I'm gonna use the money on." And I was like, perfect. What a perfect use of that money, right? It's like you're really coming full circle to heal all that was.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we were really intentional of including a cleansing ceremony for our family members and any other survivors who were there that wanted to take part in it. So we had a brushing in the big house with spruce.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so we had them smudged with spruce, wash their faces, put ochre on them. It was really quite powerful.
So you've done a lot of work in the realm of personal development and healing. What do you think are some of the key areas of healing that we as Indigenous people need to focus on in order to move from survival mode to really thriving?
I'm forever telling everybody to embrace the value of Namwayut, that we're all one, that we're all interconnected. The Indian Act and Indian residential schools worked really hard to separate us and isolate us and even put us in that mentality of isolation. And because we're forced to live in this society, we've been groomed from childhood, like through school, the education systems and all the systems to do for ourselves. Get the good grades so you can go to college and get the loan, and on the list goes, so that you can get the good job and pay the taxes. And that's how this country is set up, what they call success. And that has really taken the focus away of how we lived before colonization. That value of Namwayut was ingrained in everything we did. I used to lie in the field when I was a little kid and daydream about what life was like before, because I heard my dad and his sisters and cousins talk about when they were kids. You know, he shares a story about growing up in Guildford. I thought, my life is so far from that. And I was really angry when I was a kid when I was thinking about this.
Yeah.
But the idea that they were safe in their communities, and literally every parent would help take care of all the kids. Like they could go anywhere and be fed or, you know, be taken care of if they got hurt.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen enough. Because again, we're forced into this ideology that we have to, it's all me, 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 me. I have to do this to be successful and have the car and the house and all these other things. There's less focus on how we just care for each other on a daily basis. Our ancestors woke up every day and everybody had a purpose. Everybody had a role to play in the survival of the whole community.
Right.
And those things are gone as well too. And it was really, you know, intentionally ingrained in our people through, I believe, you know, the Indian residential school system. That don't talk, don't trust, don't feel. And that really solidified the walls that, you know, we throw up around ourselves to keep ourselves safe. Add that onto all the trauma that everybody went through. And, you know, in my generation, I realized this through my own healing, that I could only grow up and live what I saw. My examples, my role models. And everybody in my life were Indian residential school survivors. So it wasn't just the addictions. I believe addictions are a symptom of trauma.
Totally.
I realize that
100%.
now. So I was literally just watching all of these traumatized people trying to raise families. And
when they hadn't even seen it, when they were in residential school too, right?
They had no parents to teach them. So how were they going to be parents to us? So I've been really heavy focused on the healing and helping our people heal. I've been really open with my own personal story and my journey so that hopefully it can be an example to somebody else. Like, we can do this. We can get past all of the inflictions of colonization and you know, live a healthier meaning emotional integrity.
Yeah, something you might not know about me is that since like 1990, I was helping to coordinate residential school healing workshops for Indigenous people, like in reserves all over BC. So that was also something that was a huge immersion into our history, because it was like even before people were really talking about the damage that came from the system, right? And hearing firsthand accounts over and over of what our people went through. It's amazing that we're actually still here and still like moving forward in a good way, considering what everyone has been through and the intergenerational trauma that we still live with every day. It's a true testament to how resilient we really are, especially when you look at people like your dad who've gone through the worst of it and then come out on the other side being still so loving and just like he just exudes love everywhere he goes, and so do you, and your whole family does, truly.
Yeah, we've been really intentional, especially since Karen and my dad founded Reconciliation Canada. So we weren't just talking about reconciliation, we were living it and applying it in our own personal relationships. I often talk about my mom too. She went to Indian residential school as well. And, you know, came out like all the other women. They had either lost their voice or were just super angry. And my mom had lost her voice. Her and my dad married right out of residential school and had the 5 of us. People are really shocked to hear about how rageful my father was before. Because, he's
transformed.
Absolutely. Like, he's done some major work to heal himself. You know, we always hear his story. But I tell my mother's story as a woman who, she actually left my father. She left once when I was 5, and then they got back together, and then they left again when I was 11. But the second time she left, she was really intentional. She wanted to go find herself because she had no clue.
She'd never had the opportunity.
She was in residential school, then got married. That was all she knew and had. And that wasn't we didn't have a quiet, peaceful home. And so she left to find herself, and in finding herself, she ended up running a transition home in Winnipeg. for
really?
women fleeing abusive relationships.
Wow.
Yeah, and then when she finally came back home again, it was just under 2 years later, she moved to Campbell River and then ran a transition house in Campbell River as well. So
Oh, wow.
she used her experience to help others.
others.
Yeah. Yeah.
Isn't that the most transformative thing to do, though, really? Like, a lot of times when you're in the healing realms, they say the more you help others, the more you're healing yourself in a way, too.
After that, she worked with Native court workers for a lot of years in Victoria, helping our people through the justice system, which is another system that just has done so much damage to all the systems have, really. You know, but there's people like my mom and my dad who I'm really grateful that they are my parents and they are my role models, because you know, not only did I learn their traumas and dysfunctions, but I learned how to have courage to make a decision to want to heal and grow and learn something different. And then how do you show up in the world after that?
And you guys were also doing it in a time where people weren't even talking about healing, right? Like, it's sad to even still today, there's still this shame around just even admitting that you need healing or that you're doing the healing work. It's almost like people kind of downplay it or something. But I mean, it takes courage to come out and say, I'm still on a healing path, guys.
Yeah. Yeah. I really believe that about my mom, because there's still women who just stay and stay and stay, right? Because of that. She had the courage to leave and do the work. And I like to think that that's what helped push my father too into healing. Was that, oh, wait a minute, maybe I'm not doing something right, and I do have some work to do myself.
Is that during the period where he decided to get sober, when they were separated, or?
Yeah, the first time. So my mom left when I was 5 or 6. They sobered up when I was 7. And they were separated, but they both decided at the same time, the same month, the same week. The same year, they sobered up, and then next thing you know, we're all living together again.
So tell us more about the work that you do in your consulting and facilitating.
Right. So I started Ladders to Kindness training 4 years ago this month. And I started it after leaving Reconciliation Canada. I worked with my family there for 9 years as their community engagement lead, and I co-developed and delivered everything community engagement. Because our family was working on our own reconciliation, it was all our families, my dad, my older sister, and then my brother joined us, and I still am. I'm 55, I'm still considered babe. People still call me babe. And that kind of spilled over into a working relationship.
Right.
And it was really prominent, I believe, with my older sister. She raised me. I give her all the credit in the world for helping me get through all the crap that we went through and everything. But I think it was our personal old relationship was showing up in the dynamic of my older bossy sister being my boss. She's great at what she does, but it spilled over into our sister relationship.
Family dynamics, it's hard when you're working together. I get it.
So Karen and I had a big conversation about our relationship, about our working relationship. And, you know, we both agreed it would be better for our family ties, our family, you know, being sisters, if I didn't work there anymore. And so she supported me and still really does in my business. And I still support Reconciliation Canada and everything they do. And I started Ladders to Kindness training because I had all these visions and things that I wanted to do, but my hands were a little bit tied under the vision of Reconciliation Canada.
Right.
So I started Ladders to Kindness training, and my founding deliverable is lateral kindness. What lateral kindness is and why we need to actually have conversations about it, because just expecting people to be nice isn't going to work.
Yeah.
We have
need strategies.
decades and generations of lateral violence that have existed in our people. And it's been so normalized we don't even know what it is. We can't even name it because it's just been a part of who we were for generations. And so I wanted to talk about that history, to educate people on what lateral violence is, why it shows up, and how can we move forward in better ways.
Yeah.
And that includes talking about trauma. You know, I give little tips on nothing grand because I'm not a psychologist or certified counselor. I did go to school to be a counselor, but I haven't certified myself through the business part.
With the Reconciliation Canada work, that was a lot of working with non-Indigenous people, right? And then your work is kind of more shifted towards working with Indigenous people.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, big change. And where I really wanted my focus to be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And more healing for people.
Yeah.
Just, I want to share everything that I've learned, all the tools and everything that's benefited me.
Yeah.
I just want to turn around and share it with everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, take what works and leave what doesn't. I have the lateral kindness training that I expanded on that with cultural safety training. And again, that's for the non-Indigenous people because they still want to be involved. Mm-hmm. We have a lot of allies who are sincerely wanting to walk with us as we do the work that we need to do to elevate ourselves as Indigenous people.
Yeah.
And then I also continue with the reconciliation work. There's nobody at Reconciliation Canada to deliver the dialogue workshop, so all of those requests come to me. At Reconciliation Canada, we invited leaders from non-Indigenous communities and Indigenous communities, brought them together to talk about current situations and reconciliation and how can you move forward together in a better way. So just providing safe space for people to come and actually have dialogue about what's not working, what is working, what can we do together. I've also developed Indigenous awareness training. That again, that's just more information for non-Indigenous people who work with Indigenous people or have Indigenous employees so that they can have a better understanding of who we are, how we are, why we show up the way we show up, and what do you need to do to provide a safe space for people. Yeah. So a lot of history, colonial history, Canada history, and including Indigenous history, all ways to say that we have all of this in us. And if we feel safe enough, we're going to show up in better ways, and we can even share that with you and how you can do better and move forward in better ways as well. So I like to share about how we existed before colonization, about lifting one another up, and we woke up every day thinking, how can I help my family today, or my village today, or my community, or my nation today? What can I do? And that was how we lived before, and that's why I think we were so successful and thriving. We didn't just exist.
Yeah.
We weren't just nomads. We were thriving. And I really want that to come across in everything that I deliver. Kind of off the side of my desk, I do laughter yoga. That's more fun for me than anything, but it is another tool that I would love everybody to be able to tap into. So I also offer that. As long as it's wellness related, I can go in and create a workshop for different communities. I'm really excited. Next week, I'm delivering a week-long retreat for Indigenous women.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, so I'm so excited about that. That's not really a quiet part of who I am, but I have been called a feminist. I don't call myself that. I'm a realist. I think we need to be heard more, seen more, understood more, have more input in everything, everywhere, Indigenous women.
Don't you find it's interesting to me, because I think that, from my sense anyways, I could be wrong, but I think when I think back traditionally, I think our women were we were more revered and more respected in a lot of ways than they are now. I think that because the Western culture was so patriarchal, our culture kind of shifted towards being patriarchal in a similar way. Whereas with our matriarchs have always had a very strong role, and they were always very revered and respected. And so I understand with your resistance to saying you're a feminist, but I think that traditionally that's kind of, it would have been built into who we are as a people to be respected in that way.
Absolutely. The Indian Act did so much harm to Indigenous women with all of the things that they did to oppress us. We were the very last demographic in Canada given the right to vote, Indigenous women, 10 years after all other women. So they went hard because I think they did see the power in who we were in our communities. Yeah. That goes hand in hand with all of the Indigenous women who lost their status when they married out. Yeah. And then a non-Indigenous woman could marry an Indigenous man and gain status. Yeah. They knew she wasn't going to come in and have the same influence that we had. Yeah. Because we were raised that way. So I think you're right. We were heavily influenced by the patriarchal government that exists today, but Indigenous women were far more integral in how successful we were beforehand. We had input in everything because who has their thumb on the pulse of the people? It's us, right? And I don't mean to diminish when people say we're the life givers. We're far more than the life givers. Yeah. That is huge. It's important. but we're far more than that. We knew day in and day out what was working and what wasn't working for our families, for the communities, for the homes, for everything. And so we did have more influence in the decision making. I think we've had way more positions of being decision makers
Totally.
than what is now.
Well, even the chiefs are very readily admitting to the powerhouses behind the scenes are the women, right? They might not be the ones front and center getting the accolades, but they're definitely the power forces behind the scenes, making sure that everything happens.
Yeah.
What are parts of or aspects of the culture that make you feel really hopeful for the next generations? Like parts of the culture that you see thriving as we move forward?
Seeing the kids, they're so invested. Like it's not just a subject in school.
Yeah.
I'm sure they would love to just do this all day, every day.
Right?
Learn the songs, dance the dances, learn the meanings behind it. Yeah, that's so amazing to see that they're not just dancing and singing for entertainment. They're invested.
The other cool thing is that they're not just learning about their culture from books. Like there's so many opportunities to be involved now. Like I'm really impressed that at your age that there was a daycare, or did you say daycare or preschool?
Preschool. Yeah.
Preschool, yeah, like that's awesome. Because I mean, that's something that not everybody had. Like my daughter was the first year of the Aboriginal kindergarten when it was like just introduced in the province. And so she was in the very first class in the province. And that was amazing because she went from Aboriginal Head Start preschool from age 3 to 4 and then age 5 to the kindergarten. So like our kids do have so much more access to just being in a cultural environment, even in our institutions, right?
Yeah. Thinking of all the things that make me hopeful about our culture, the kids obviously, but now with technology the way it is, making it more accessible for a lot of people who can't get home.
Yeah, they
for
live
the
far away.
big ceremonies and stuff, for that connection, living out Nunavut even online.
Yeah. And even just like the language resources online and stuff, people being able to learn their language from sitting at a computer at home.
Yeah.
It's pretty incredible.
Yeah. I have a friend in the Squamish Nation, he's developing an app for their language. Yeah, I was like, wow, everybody needs that.
Yeah. And you're like, how do I say this? Technology can be our friend sometimes.
Yeah.
One of the things that I always think is sort of a conundrum with our cultures is that, like, as living people and living cultures, things that always evolve and change and we adapt. We also have certain things that we want to adhere to tradition, and we don't want certain aspects of our culture to change or adapt. Do you want to talk about some aspects that you think are really important to keep as is and not kind of change with the times?
I think just the values. It's what those ceremony songs and dances are teaching us. That can't change. I do think that we have always been adaptable.
Yeah.
And that's how we survive. So we can't get stuck in being so rigid that, this is how my grandpa or my great-grandpa did it and we cannot change. I don't think that's very realistic. And, it's kind of the opposite of how our people survived since time immemorial. We were always adaptable. And the stories obviously have had to change over time too, because we're experiencing different things. Everything that we see in the big house, they all tell stories of somebody's lived experience. I think that it's just as important for us in our time to start telling our stories and embed that in our culture in some way. Still using the same format, but being able to tell our stories in this time for the generations to come.
Yeah, I think about that kind of stuff too, but I always wonder, like, how much of that is like going outside of tradition too, right? Like, how do you weave that in a way that it's not going to be sort of frowned upon as if you're bringing something new in, or, you know what I mean?
I think it always will be. Change is scary.
What about gender roles? See, this is something that I'm always like, how does that work? Like, will women sing on the log? Or, like think of back in the day when women were primarily weavers, but now some men weave, and some people think that it's not okay, and some people are like, get over it. You know what I mean? So it's like we have strict gender roles with certain things. And I wonder about moving into the future. Is it going to be something that we kind of make more room for and come to accept, or?
Yeah. My unpopular opinion is that we have been so influenced by the patriarchy that exists, you know, through Department of Indian Affairs, that mentality of patriarchy. Mm-hmm. I think we have lost some of our ways of being because of that. And it was so heavily ingrained on the people who were very first had that imposed on them, and then trying to keep your children safe. Oh no, don't say or do that out in public because you're going to go to jail. That was their reality. And so that heavy, oh no, don't say that or don't do that, has been handed down for generations. But I don't for once ever believe that we were so rigid on.
Yeah.
I believe we did have gay men and lesbian women and transgender people. I think we did, but all of that has been silenced for how many generations, and we can't really tap back into that because of everything that has happened to us colonially through the laws that they imposed on us. That's my own firm belief, is that we did have that fluidity.
Yeah, we must have had a lot of flexibility, different aspects. Like, for one thing, when you think about some elders saying that women never sang on the log, but then we have, you know, video footage of certain women singing on the log because there was not enough men to even sing on the log, and not enough knowledge keepers to even know those songs. And like, if you want that part of the culture to continue, then yeah, there's a woman at the log. She knew the songs, right? Yeah. So I think that you can see how certain time periods there was flexibility with things like that. And maybe it was really only out of necessity, but maybe it was that it wasn't that big of a deal. Who knows? But yeah, these are the sorts of things I ponder about a lot about our culture, about moving forward. And I'm like, we are a living, breathing culture, and things change and adapt. But it's like knowing the parameters of what is okay, you know?
Yeah. I'm a living example of that, being a hamatsa.
Right, yeah.
I was initiated in 1984, and I never saw another female hamatsa before me.
Yeah. So there's some people who think that you can be a female hamatsa only if it came from a female position, or do you believe that, or that's a totally different?
No, mine came from a man.
And it's the chief's prerogative to say who gets that position.
Yeah, I was 14. I never even entered my mind that, oh, I'd love to be a hamatsa one day. Never entered my mind because it was so ingrained in me at the time. This is a woman's role. This is, you know, only men do that, blah, blah, blah. And then my dad and my Auntie Elsie sat me down one day, and they're like, oh, at the next potlatch, you're going to be initiated as a hamatsa. I was like, I literally stopped breathing, and I was like panicking.
Yeah. You're like, why me?
Yeah. I could hear the murmurs of people. You know, what is she doing? And blah, 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 stuff like that. Nobody ever came to me.
But that's the interesting part about it too, is that it's not your say, right? Yeah. It's like the chief's prerogative to say where that position goes, and then you got to go with it. Yeah. Ready or not.
I didn't ask. I didn't choose. They're like, this is what you're doing. It's like, okay. Yeah. That's the thing. That it's the chief's prerogative. Everything. All of these things. Yeah. You know, when I think about, you mentioned women at the log. I have seen the videos and heard recordings of women singing with the men. I don't think that we should take over and it be all women. No. But I do think we do have a spot in there to harmonize. We're always talking about harmony. That's how we lived, you know, in harmony with one another and in harmony with nature. And, you know, keep that harmony inside our big house and how we tell those stories. Yeah. Yeah.
I think there is lots of accounts, too, of them saying that women, even from the seats, would be singing along. Yeah. Harmonizing, so.
I do anyways.
Yeah, I do too. I can't help it. If I know a song, I'm going to sing along.
I've done my best to incorporate the values that I take from our culture. And how do I translate that into all these tools that I now know? Yeah. And they're intertwined. There's no differentiating. That's part of the reason why I don't want to be a certified practicing counselor or a therapist or anything like that.
It's still too Western, right?
Yeah. So I'm able to translate the teachings that our ancestors have always been giving us through the songs, the dances, the language, the worldview and understanding into these tools
Yeah.
that Western methods call tools of
Yeah.
healing. I think it was just literally how we lived. And so in my business, I do my best to translate it that way. And I'm always saying, well, this is how our old people lived. This is how our ancestors lived. And this is what they meant when, you know, we dance this way or sing this song and those types of things. So everything is really translatable into Western healing. So everything I do is really based on the values that I've learned in my lifetime of being involved in our culture. It was really the thing that got me through the hard times in my life. As a little girl, growing up, my parents were still drinking, and there was the parties and the predators and everything, neglect and all of those things. I could literally close my eyes and think about how I felt sitting in the big house at 4 years old, not doing anything. I wasn't involved then. I wasn't dancing. I was just sitting there. But that was the only time and place in my life where I felt safe, where I felt like I mattered, where I felt like I belonged. And I was able to carry that whenever life got tumultuous at home or, you know, in the town that I grew up in. So it's always been the foundation that got me through.
That's amazing.
Yeah, remembering those, how it made me feel. That value of Namwayut that is literally built into everything we did. The beating of the log, and if you step barefoot on the floor of the big house and hear the fire. It was all meant to come in here and say, you're a part of all of this. You're not separate. You don't walk alone in this world. And that's really what I want everybody to know and feel, because we're so divided and put in these silos and othered and pushed away and made to feel shame. Everything about who we were before colonization nurtured that in us, and that's, you know, the big idea of what Namwayut really means, that we're never, ever alone. We're connected to one another. We're connected to the land. We're connected to spirit. We're connected to the universe, everything, that interconnection that colonization really worked hard to break. That's what I want to bring back. That's the healing that I talk about, is that everybody gets to feel that way all the time. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, thanks for coming out today. That was really good.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm excited. Always excited to share my thoughts and ideas and be inspired by people who are doing the same thing to elevate our people. Really appreciate you guys. Yeah.